Alright guys, so CMCO continues, and you would see based on comments that my current series of retro reviews, throwback reviews that I've featured, like I think maybe 8 to 10 cars by now, including the Accord 8th Gen, the Proton Prove, Proton Inspira, BMW F10 and a few others. So based on the comments, I think it's been quite well received series from you guys, and I'm actually starting to get requests. So in today's video, I'll be responding to yet another request, and and I saw this from I think at least 2 or 3 commenters already. You guys want a retro review of the Hyundai Sonata YF, and here it comes. Okay, so the Sonata YF, my first test drive report of the car was dated in January 2011, so basically it was launched at the end of 2010. I remember back then when I was, before launching, Hyundai brought us to preview the cars, and when we first saw this car, we were blown away by the sudden leap in design, in execution, in quality, in features as well. You see, because right up to that point, Korean cars, they were slowly building up in terms of their reputation, right? They started off as, the budget cars that were like for people desperate to get out of their Protons and Pro Duos. Then the Forte's arrival in 2009 changed the picture. Right? It made people sit up and take notice that the Korean car makers are onto something. They are stepping up their game, and the Sonata YF together with the Tucson LM, I think, Tucson LM came hot on the heels of the Forte, and it was riding on a wave of strong. Like a strong surge from Korean cars, because suddenly people are no longer looking at Korean cars as just a cheaper alternative to Japanese cars. They still expected Korean cars to be cheap, but suddenly there was a design element to this car. And leading up, before the Sonata YF, there was the Sonata NF. Now that one was already a relatively, it was a competent car, but I suspect most of you guys probably won't remember it. Because if you remember earlier on, there was the Sonata that looked like a Jaguar, alright? That came out with this ad, right? Front like a Mercedes, back like a Jaguar, and then with Tiptronic automatic transmission. That was a big deal at the time. But after that, there was the Sonata NF, which I think you guys would still see fairly commonly on the streets of Singapore as taxis, right? They were solid cars, well-built cars, but they lacked finesse. They lacked style. They were very plain Jane kind of cars. So the Sonata YF was a big step up. It built on the NF's progressive improvements from the predecessor, but the design was mind-blowing. The specs were top of class or almost thereabouts in terms of features lah. And pricing, it still undercuts the Japanese, with the exception that time I remember of the Tiana. Hey, careful lah! You cannot understand that. So if you guys remember, at that time, around the same time, 2010, Nissan launched the Tiana, the locally assembled Tiana, alright, and it had the 2.0 and the 2.5 V6. That one, the Tiana really shocked us with its pricing because it totally undercut both the Camry and the Accord by substantial margins, and was a decently good car to drive. So the Sonata came in, had a price advantage over the Accord and the Camry, but was not far below the Tiana. So that was the stage that was set at the time. And let's just read back to you what I wrote in the in my test drive report. So this was the 2011 I drove the 2.4. So at that time, Hyundai sold three variants of the Sonata: 2.0 standard, 2.0 high spec, and 2.4. So it was exactly like how Camry and Toyota, what you call that, arranged the Accord. It's how Honda and Toyota arranged how the Camry and the Accord, variant structure, right? But but when you go variant for variant, each equivalent variant of the Sonata offered more equipment, but charged less money against the equivalent Camry and Accord. And this, don't forget, this Sonata was fully imported, so that pricing is actually not bad if you think about it, right? So the base model 2 liter started at 135,000 ringgit, and at that time, it had dual airbags, 17-inch wheels, semi-leather seats, auto cruise, and this was the thing those days. iPod connectivity, nobody cares about that right now. It had electric folding side mirrors as well, and rear aircon vents. And the top spec was the 2.4 that went for 163,000 ringgit. So that was the version that that was the variant that I drove. And oh, this one I have to tell. That time, right, Hyundai were very naughty with the way they offer their test cars to us, the media. Okay, this was my second time encountering such a thing. The first time was with the i30. All right, so Hyundai normal Korean car, they will come with all the various Korean tires, right? Either Hankook or Kamho. But when I drove the i30, they gave us Dunlop Formula D01, which is a sports tire that had crazy good wet grip. And here, with the Sonata, they gave they sent us the car in Michelin Primacy LC tires. So, yeah, that definitely would have impacted the car's evaluation. So I at that time, those days during my auto days, I always had this practice of stating the tire make and model where in my test drive reports. Okay, so so in the 2.4 liter car, right, what is I noted: exclusive equipment, power adjusting front seats, HIDs, and single zone auto climate control. There's also electronic stability control, panoramic sunroof, and I said push button start, but I believe keyless entry was definitely there lah. Outputs of the 2.4 was 176 horsepower, 228 Newton meters of torque. So this is the very familiar Theta 2 engine that the Hyundai and Kia used in the Tucson, the Santa Fe, the Sorento, a lot of cars. And this was the time when Hyundai, Kia, and Mitsubishi, they were part of this global alliance, global engine manufacturing alliance, right? So the 2.4 liter block that they used in the Sonata, basically the Theta 2 block is the same aluminum block as Mitsubishi's 4B11 and 4B12 engines. So that's something to share with you guys, all right? But the internals of the engine are different. The cam probe, the head is different. The software is different. The only thing that Mitsubishi and the Koreans shared were basically just the block design. Both of them, they took the same block and then they made their own engines out of it. Now, at that time, of course, the Hyundai fits, and it's still in use transmission, the Hyundai in-house 6-speed automatic transmission. At that time, they were telling us this transmission is maintenance free. All right, under severe usage, you may need to change fluids for every 300,000 kilometer intervals. And those days I believe lah, but now, this day and age, I'm a little bit skeptical when people say maintenance-free automatic transmission. But since I'm on this, right, and since this Sonata is now 10 years old, right, so just want to get feedback from you guys out there. If you are a Sonata owner, Sonata YF owner, or any of these Korean cars with the 6-speed automatic transmission, especially if you have not changed your ATF, how are your transmissions holding up? Okay, certainly I have actually not heard of much complaints of this transmission over the last 10 years. So I think it must be a pretty robust transmission, even though the actual programming of the actual calibration of the transmission may be so, but I think the durability of this transmission certainly is I don't think it's in question. So my driving impressions. Thus far, the Sonata's package appears promising. The way it looks further heightens your anticipation as you get behind the wheel. Put the lever to D, move off, and you will immediately be impressed at the serene peacefulness of the cabin. Although top-end refinement is not the Theta 2's forte, at the low to mid-range, the engine spins relatively quietly with minimal intrusions of noise into the cabin. The engine provides more than enough grunt to make brisk progress, and because of the extra oomph, the transmission does not hunt like how it sometimes does with the 2-liter model. Straight line pace is not what the Sonata lacks. It has more than enough in reserve for you to drive deep into radar gun beeping territory. Now, before I drove this 2.4, we also had a very brief media drive where I tested the 2-liter model. And I don't have a written report of that media drive, partly because that time in Auto World, both myself and Uncle YS, both of us were with Auto World, right? So both of us went for that drive. I rode the Tucson, he rode the Sonata after that. But yeah, I think I remember at that time when noting that when I drove the 2-liter Sonata, there was a bit of hesitancy and hunting with the 6-speed automatic transmission. So continuing on with my article, show it some curves or imperfect roads, however, and faults begin to show up. Among the 3 NVH elements, noise, vibration, and harshness, Hyundai was able to successfully nail the first 2, but there remains a degree of harshness in its ride. To some, that may hint at a sporty bias chassis tuning, but then you also soon find out that hard driving is not the Sonata's forte either. Push it hard at the corner and you will find understeer setting in way too early for comfort. A good friend of mine, Daniel Wong, formerly from CBT, once said, at that time, relative to the context at the time, the Sonata drives like a Camry, but rides like a Accord, but drives like a Camry, which in those days is not complimentary at all, because during that time, against the 8th gen Accord as well as the Camry XV40, the Camry was the far more comfortable car, but didn't handle as well. The Accord on yet was the polar opposite. Drives well, but ride not so impressive. So yeah, the Sonata actually managed to blend the worst characteristics of those 2 cars. So in honesty, the Sonata rather missed the mark in terms of its driving dynamics. The argument of ride and handling is not Hyundai's forte does not exactly hold water either, because other Hyundai cars that I've tested recently, the i10 1.25, the i30 and Tucson, all handled rather well. The i30 2.0 in particular was a joy to drive, and it's most unfortunate that Hyundai was not able to replicate that newfound prowess with the Sonata. So, but my conclusion, I said, this is still a vastly improved model over its predecessor. 1, there are faults and bugs for Hyundai to iron out. Yes! Alright. But Hyundai certainly deserves the plaudits for being one of the most improved manufacturers in recent years. This is before the Chinese woke up in the last 5-6 years. Okay? My conclusion at the time, the Japanese were still ahead, alright? The Accord, the Camry were still the better cars. But the Sonata was not that far off behind either of them. So in the present, yes, the latest Sonata did not hit the bullseye, but believe me, this was a very narrow miss. Yeah.
Thank God that the brothers on the rise now. Endless celebrations all in my house. Levitating now, I'm super duper fly now. London boy, but DC where I reside now. Put the time in while you always yelling time out. And to quit it, cause I know I'm coming with it. You were sitting, you were wishing I was handling my business. Now I got the ball like Harry Potter playing Quidditch. And my business is humongous, you would think that happens in there. Damn man, I'm all that, yeah, I'm all that. Looking for that whip, yeah, that what you call that. I'ma blow up in the summer, have him yelling fall back. And I've always been ahead like an effing ball cap. Man, I came in the game like, whoa. Got a couple chains on me cause I like gold. They told me I'm the best and I told them I know. Cause when I'm in your town, every ticket I sold. Yeah, they saying I'm the man. Facts, bro. Lot of haters. Tell me where they at though. I'm the new pop, all I do is rap though.
So in 2013, Hyundai gave the Sonata a facelift, and one of the most important updates, besides some minor cosmetic changes, was that they actually introduced a new engine for the 2-liter variant. It's a completely new engine family. It's called the new engine family. So for the 2-liter displacement size, they phased out the Theta 2, and they introduced it in 2013. But they continue to offer the 2.4 as well. 2.4 continued with the Theta 2, but they at that time they also increased the number of variants. So just 2 liters, the 2-liter capacity alone, right? You have a choice of 4 variants, priced from 137,000 to 151,000 ringgit. All right. At that time. So you have the elegance model at base price. There's the executive plus, and what I drove was the sport variant, which was something straight up I did not recommend, because the thing is that the sport from executive plus, which is 149,000, go to sport at 151,000. It's just a locally fitted body kit that, in my opinion, was it's not worth your money. All right. The new 2-liter engine, or the new 2-liter engine, so interestingly quoted with lower outputs than the 2-liter Theta 2. The 2-liter Theta 2 made 165 horsepower, 198 Newton meters of torque, whereas the new engine made 161 horsepower, 194 Newton meters of torque. But the new engine is also 30 kilograms lighter than the Theta 2, and the result is 1% improvement of fuel consumption, which, in all honesty, day-to-day usage, it's probably not going to translate to significant savings. Yes. Yes. All right. So, but they continued with the 6-speed automatic transmission. It's just that they changed from the pre-facelift models gated shift lever, the one where you go to the button type where you press the button and you pull down in a straight line. Okay, so standard equipment for all variants: auto headlights, leather seats, tilt and telescopic steering, keyless entry, and dual airbags. You go to executive model, already gets, yes. Why? Executive model, you get panoramic sunroof, electric driver seat adjustment, and stability control. So ESC is not standard yet. The Executive Plus model is the one to go for, because you get a multimedia touchscreen, which I think, if I remember correctly, is a locally fitted unit. But more important, that touchscreen brings you a reverse camera. So that is a very important addition, if you ask me. Alright. Styling wise, they didn't make a significant change, but you get new LED tail lights, new alloy wheels design, and they made some tweaks to the front grills. One big change that they did make, however, is that they changed the side mirrors to much larger ones. So well, it's a balance, right? There's more air drag, but at the same time you get a better view. The pre-facelift Sonatas had much slimmer side mirrors that probably nicer in design, but doesn't give you as good a view out back. Okay, and this is good. The sport trim of our of our test car, right? You look at the back, it has a quad tailpipe look. Now, but here's the thing, all right? And so what they do is the muffler actually connects to the two tips to the right. The two tips to the left is just a U-shaped pipe, all right? That they just bolt on there and that's it, to give you the impression that it's quad tailpipes. And you know, when you look at it close but not too close, you still see that, hey, it's an actual pipe that goes inside. The center console has been revised to a more intuitive layout, and well, there's the climate control is now a simpler 3-dial arrangement. All right, I think the one before was a bit of, like, you know, was something that they tried to copy Volvo's design, but didn't quite work out so well. Another thing, and one thing that Hyundai did pioneer with this Sonata, or HSDM rather, was that they fitted the car with a dash cam. This was the first car in the market that came with a dash cam straight out from the dealership. It was what they call a Lucas black box, but it's locally installed. It didn't come from the factory. So, but it was something new at the time. All right, nowadays it's more common, but back then, it was new. So let's see what I have to say in terms of the driving experience. It starts off well with strong takeoff. Oh yes, I remember it leaps off the line quite aggressively, and convincing mid-range. But as you clock the miles, it becomes clear that this engine, like its predecessor, does not enjoy being worked hard. Pleasant and refined under low revs and park throttle road, the veneer of civility is completely stripped away when you bury the accelerator. The all-aluminum unit is strained and thrashy when coaxed hard, and not helping matters are the slow and hesitant shifts of Hyundai's in-house 6-speed gearbox. The best means to attain brisk progress with a Sonata is to gently ease it to speed. This is not a car you can force the issue with. Dynamics noticeably improved, chassis composure clearly bumped up a notch. Differences are particularly noticeable at low speeds, where the ride over pavements and poor surfaces seems less busy than before. It's not what you call a sporting setup, but Hyundai deserves credit for sensibly focusing its attention on improving comfort, thereby making the Sonata a much more pleasant vehicle to perform the urban commute with. So my conclusion, far from being the best car in its segments to drive, the Sonata is a compelling option on the grounds with style, equipment, and unbeatable value. So Hyundai clearly took a few criticisms that were leveled at the Sonata to heart, and improvements that were made in this facelift, although minor, are clear to see. The new 2013 Sonata builds on the strengths that were inherent to the original product and also address some of its flaws, though not all of it convincingly. There's still work to be done to further improve its driving experience, which is the only thing lacking in an otherwise complete and competitive package. So overall, right, the Sonata YF, that was the car that objectively reviewing, right, it's not as good as the equivalent Accord or Camry, all right, despite yes, superior equipment, but the driving experience was underwhelming. But it raised the bar so high from the Sonata NF that, you know, that the market saw and Hyundai's considerable effort in this car, and appreciated liked what they saw, because the market, consumers, always like to see when manufacturers put in their best effort at a product. And the Sonata YF at that time represented the best of what Hyundai had to offer. It represented a quantum leap from the car before, even though it's still not there with the competition yet. So um, when we saw what the Sonata how the Sonata YF improved from the NF, then the expectation was accordingly high when they launched the LF. Right, that was the successor model that I reviewed in 2015. So, but the thing is that when the Sonata LF came out, I found it to be rather underwhelming. Styling wise, they toned it down. They toned down the styling, which is in a way understandable. All right, because once you achieve a certain level of success, you want to mature your product a bit. But the thing is, the Sonata YF got Hyundai to a point where they were close to the mainstream opposition, but wasn't quite there yet. They needed the LF actually needed to be the car that further upped the ante. But instead, what happened was that what we saw was a very, very conservative product, not just in terms of styling, but also in terms of the lineup, because Hyundai decided to offer the Sonata LF in Malaysia only with the 2-liter engine, and price wise, it's no longer cheap. The base model is 143,000 ringgit, and it is actually more, and there are actually variants of the Accord and the Tiana, both locally assembled admittedly, that cost less. But the base model, what they call Elegance B variant, it has daytime running lights, it had rear fog lamps, leather seats, electric driver seat adjustment, rear aircon vents, keyless entry, and electronic stability control, but just 2 airbags lah. Okay. There's the mid-spec model, Elegance, 150,000 ringgit, and you get 6 airbags. You get Supervision instrument cluster, which is Hyundai's version of the Optitron cluster lah, with 4.2-inch color LCD trip computer, and a factory-fitted Android touchscreen system, front parking sensors, reverse camera, and a dash cam. Then on top of it, there is the 158,000 ringgit executive model, which you get bigger rims, 18 inches, bi-xenon headlamps, active cornering lights, electric front passenger seat adjustment, and a panoramic sunroof, which alright, at 158,000 ringgit at that time, you can get the Toyota Camry 2.0G, which is the facelifted Camry 2.0G, the new D4S engine, as well as the Mazda 6 2.0. So it was like, wow, Hyundai is now moving into Japanese pricing territory, but with a product that feels more conservative than the one before. So, but the thing is that, right, the thing about the Sonata LF is this: from the outside it looks like a very plain car, but it is firstly an all new development from ground up. So well, let me see what is the important one. So engine carries over the predecessor, so you get the new engine, multi-point injection, 152 horsepower and 194 newton meters of torque, which is a 9 horsepower reduction from the YF facelift. Okay, and let me see. And so the thing is this, that 2-liter engine is perfectly okay to offer as a base model, but you have to ask the question: you are already pricing yourself. You already have variants of pricing yourself at the Japanese level and higher. There should have been the option of a more expensive variant, of a more powerful variant, 2.4-liter engine or turbo or whatever. They didn't do it. So at that time, Hyundai says the LF was following what they call the fluidic sculpture 2.0 styling, and the effect is a more matured and resolved evolution of the YF styling. Okay, so keyless entry is standard across the board, and there's also hands-free boot lid opening, which is unlike a lot of car makers where you do the kick the boot lid thing, right? This one you just stand behind your boot, it pops itself just like that. So the idea is that, right, if you stand at the boot long enough, chances are the thinking is you likely want to open it. So yeah, if you're holding the keys and you're behind the car, directly behind the car for 3 seconds, the boot will open itself. And this actually, there's a funny story behind this. So this smart trunk feature is also available in the Tucson. All right, and I remember when I had the Tucson, as some of you would have known by now based on my home videos, right, I reverse park my cars. So when I had the Tucson at that time, and this was before I had the S Max, there was a time when I still had, I'm not sure it was I was probably before I had the E39. At that time I still had just the Waja and the Persona at home. So I was used to reversing my cars all the way to the back. And I was standing inside, alright, my terrace, and the car was the other side of the grill. And the trunk just suddenly decided, and the powered tailgate of the Tucson just suddenly decided to open, and bam, it hit my terrace grill. So luckily there were no scratches lah, but it was like, oh okay. Then I remember that Hyundai had this feature, hands-free opening feature that does not require you to tell it to open; it will just open itself. So the cabin of the Sonata LF, what did I say? It offers spacious accommodation, managed to cover the relevant basics of ergonomics without looking dull and dreary in the process. Hyundai at that time put the signal stocks on the left, and controls are laid out in an efficient and intuitive manner. The center console is well compartmentalized to accommodate small items, namely keys and mobile devices. Cup holders are average size, however, and will not accommodate anything with diameters larger than a regular soda can. Excuse me, sorry guys. So there's a Android-based center touchscreen, factory fitted. So it looks well integrated compared to the one in the YF that was definitely locally sourced. This was factory fitted, and you can see the superior integration to it, the way the graphics look. There is, like, a house look to it, as a proper looking CI that aftermarket units just won't give you one. Okay, so here's how it works, right? You link it to your phone, it gives you data connection to the unit. Okay, and so this is not phone mirror link, okay, but it's an Android unit inside there where if you link it to your phone, it connects to the internet, you can use it to house your Waze, your GPS or whatever. Okay, and but the thing is this, the unit refused to connect my phone's data tethering after our second day with the test car. So conceptually, this unit is a near ideal in-car entertainment solution for our times, but in reality there are a few bugs to sort it out. So it would be fantastic if the unit could accommodate a data SIM card on its own and not be reliant on tethering for its internet-based functionality. So that's like how Proton does it with the X50, X70. They have an eSIM in there, which means that the car has its own data. There's a SIM in there which Proton offers a data package, and once it expires, you can renew and continue to subscribe your own data without having to rely on your phone. So one little funny thing about the LF is that when you open the doors from the inside, right, there is no popping action, as you release the door catch. When you pull the door opener, the door just loosens. There's no sound. So I remember the first time when I opened the door, I was like, hey, why isn't the door opening? But the door actually opened without me feeling it. So I'm not sure if it's a common thing with all Sonata LFs, but on that test car, it was there on all 4 doors. So let me just browse on to the next feature. So in the Sonata LF, and maybe this is why I'm a bit disappointed with how conservatively Hyundai spec the car, because the LF is a much better car to drive than the YF. The engine feels smoother, the transmission feels better calibrated, um, and it's just much more smoother revving than before. It feels, the LF, right, it feels like a car that from a mechanical standpoint it's just superbly polished from front to back. Okay, but the question also still remains, right? Why didn't Hyundai offer the option of a more powerful variant? Okay, and they also significantly improved the ride and handling of the LF, because cornering was much more confidence inspiring. The chassis feels more composed. The damping of the ride is spot on, and in my words, rides over poor surfaces with dignity and authority. Suppression of noise was good as well. So even though it's not the most dynamic, not the sportiest car setup in the market right at that time, but it was well sorted. It felt like a car that is just well screwed together. So it was quite a waste that it's so conservative. So it was quite a waste that from a styling standpoint, it didn't level up from the YF. From yeah, and from a variant standpoint and offering standpoint, there isn't the option of a more powerful model, because Hyundai already moved themselves into the Japanese car price bracket. They should have been more and even more adventurous with the way they style and spec the car. So what I said, the new Sonata is a highly commendable product, right? One that managed to be a greater sum than of its parts, greater than the sum of its parts. Hyundai has focused much of its attention on honing the LF's refinement, and the result is a driving experience that feels more satisfying and cohesive than what its predecessor managed. In many ways, the LF is an opposite product to the YF. While its predecessor had looks that promised more than its moving gear could deliver, the LF delights by under-promising on paper and over-delivering on the road. So really, it is no surprise that the LF didn't sell well, and that is unfortunate, because the LF is a it's a properly well-resolved car, and it's sad to see that it didn't get the traction that it deserved. All right, so let's since we are here, let's go look in online and see how are the used values of these cars holding up. So we will start with the Sonata, and it was set manufacturing year from 2010 to 2015 lah. Okay, search now and sort by price high. We start with that. So the LF is still, wow, the LF not bad, man. 2015 car is still these are all holding at what, 60,000, 55,000. Now then we come to the YF, the most expensive YF that I'm seeing here, 47,000, 2012 example. Not bad. Hey, not bad. Oh no, sorry. There's one here asking for Okay, apologies for the interruption, guys. Battery went flat just now. So continuing from where I left off. So the Sonata was the YF was a car that looked better than it drives. The LF was a car that drives better than it looks. But in terms of its stature as a product, in terms of its reputation and acceptance, uh, I mean, the Sonata has good, firm fundamentals, especially the LF. But the market acceptance is still not on par with the Japanese mainstream models. So I give you an example. Right now, right, I am on Muda. Okay, I set Sonata Aircord Camry. I set it to filter 2010 to 2018 cars, and the most expensive example of the Sonata that I see here is an 85,000 ringgit car, which is an outlier, because if you go down and you see the rest of the listings, you're looking at 68,000 ringgit tops, okay, for a 2016 LF. Now you contrast this with the Accord. Now the most expensive version, there are two units here. They are listed at 135,000 ringgit. All right, one is a 2.4, one is a 2.0. So engine capacity here obviously plays little role. But the thing is, okay lah, the 2.4s in average seem to command a slightly higher price. Okay, there are a few 2.4s here more than 130,000 ringgit. But the next most expensive 2-liter model is also going for 120,000 ringgit. Then we look at the Camry. Okay, there's one 2018 car, that's the current TNGA Camry. We're going to discount that. We look at the previous gen Camry. I see 140,000 ringgit hybrid version. Okay, 2017 car listed. Then after that, it's 123,000 ringgit, also a hybrid. So obviously, where the Camry is concerned, hybrid does not affect its resale value. So after that comes a couple of Camry 2.0 GX models, a few 2.0 GX models priced between 115 to 120,000 ringgit. So we are talking. So there is that still that gap in terms of the resale value between the Sonata and its Japanese D segment rivals. So now let's flip the table a bit and see what is the cheapest, all right, examples that you can get. Now I'm seeing a few NFs here. They're going for what, 13,000 to 18,000 ringgit. But here's one. There is one 2011 Sonata 2.4 LF going for 18,000 ringgit. The next one up, okay, after that there's another one, 2010 Sonata 2.0 GLS going for 26,000 ringgit, and it seems to be around that mark for a 2010 car, 26,000 ringgit thereabouts. Now you contrast this with the Accord 2010 car. I'm seeing a few examples here going for about 32,000 ringgit. Similarly with the Camry, they are starting from 35,000 ringgit. So a big gap therefore at both ends of the spectrum with regards to resale value. So if you are looking at, so the Sonata right now, right, if you're looking for a D segment on a budget, it's still what you call it, it's still a substantially more affordable buy versus a Camry or a Accord from the same generation. But honestly, if I were shopping for this profile of car, I would limit my search to either the LF. Okay, if you want to look at a Sonata, right, I would look at the LF or the later batch versions, the facelifted versions of the YF. All right, that one, those are a bit newer with less wear and tear for you guys to worry about. In terms of reliability wise, right, there's actually no issues with the cars at all, right? I mean, I've seen these cars, so many of these cars on the road, and they don't. The last few years, Korean cars have improved tremendously on reliability. If there is any bone to pick, any criticism you want to make against Korean cars, reliability is not it. You may argue that spare parts, the availability of spare parts as well as the price competitiveness of spare parts is still not as good as the Japanese, but these are by no means painful cars to own. They have Korean cars have come a long way from those horror stories from the era, you know, of the Matrix, of the Atos, of the Gets. That's long gone. In terms of reliability, Korean cars, I dare say, is right up there with the Japanese, and in some cases, you won't be surprised that you will have friends with Korean cars that are more reliable than another one with a Japanese car. Okay, so yeah, that's the story of the Sonata. The YF was the car that made everybody stand up and take notice, but ultimately it was a car that had more show than it had go. The LF was a car with properly good fundamentals, but underwhelmed by its styling and overly conservative specification. So uh, the new Sonata that was just recently launched, and we're getting our hands on that car soon. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, until then, this is it. This is my throwback review of the Hyundai Sonata. Glad to see so many of you guys responding enthusiastically in the comment section to these videos. Definitely more coming as CMCO progresses, and you know, we want to do more videos from home to encourage everybody to stay at home as much as possible. I mean, we still have to go out and earn our living, right? But yeah, where possible, let's all stay home together, and everybody, let's stay safe. Okay, cheers, guys.